You're listening to WEOP AM 730, the voice of inquiry. It's time for Echoes of Persuasion with your host, Colt Thornton.
Where's the curve? At first glance, it seems like a perfectly reasonable question. But hidden within those three words is a quiet assumption that the Earth's curvature should be obvious to the naked eye. And if you can't see it, perhaps it isn't there. That's the subtle power of framing. Good evening. This is Colt Thornton, and you're listening to Echoes of Persuasion. The way a question is phrased shapes how you think about the answer. It defines what feels true and what seems suspicious. And most of the time, those boundaries are drawn before you even realize it. That's the power of framing. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It guides how the story feels before the story even starts. Framing shapes debate, belief, and sometimes traps you into defending a point you never meant to make. And when you recognize how it works, you start hearing persuasion in places you never noticed before. Every question carries a frame. Seeing that frame is the first step toward answering wisely. You've heard the phrase, "It's all in how you ask the question." That's framing. Language that highlights some ideas and hides others. A skilled communicator can make their point sound like common sense while making the opposing view sound clumsy or dishonest, long before any facts are discussed. That's why framing is powerful. It sets the stage. It decides what feels relevant and what doesn't. It draws your eyes to certain facts and quietly moves others out of sight. Even a question that sounds harmless can carry an invisible rule book. When someone asks, "Where's the curve?" the rules are already set. If you can't see curvature, maybe it isn't there. That's not a debate. That's a frame. And the only way to win that kind of game is to see the board you're standing on. Some frames don't just guide the talk. They lock it down. That's where the loaded question comes in. A loaded question hides an assumption that forces you to play by its terms. The classic example, when did you stop lying? Answer it either way and you've already admitted guilt. Flat Earth debates are full of these traps. Where's the curve? Assumes you should see Earth's roundness at ground level. It's false, but the question feels fair, and that's the trick. Most people respond to the surface words instead of spotting the setup. And the moment you do that, you're already playing someone else's game. The only real way out is awareness. See the assumption first, then decide if that question even deserves an answer. Frames work because our brains love shortcuts. When someone asks a question, we assume it's fair. We accept its terms as neutral and step right into it. It saves time, but it hands over control. Framing also ties into identity. We want to feel right, part of the group that gets it. A clever frame gives you that feeling, that sense of belonging, even when the logic doesn't hold up. That's why framing is so central to persuasion. It doesn't just affect what evidence you trust. It shapes what you even count as evidence at all. Active listening is the countermeasure. Pause before you answer. Ask yourself what's really being said, not just what's being asked. That pause alone can keep you from getting pulled into someone else's story. The hardest part about framing is noticing it. It feels so natural that most people never question it. To spot a frame, listen for what's being assumed instead of what's being said. Hidden assumptions often sound harmless, but they quietly bend reality. Ask yourself simple questions. Does the question define the problem in a way that picks a side? Does it assume something unproven is already true? Does it quietly change what counts as proof? Once you hear that shift, you can take control. Rephrase the question in your own words. Call out the hidden assumption, or if you have to, refuse the premise altogether. Reframing isn't avoidance, it's clarity. It's how you return the conversation to solid ground. Framing isn't limited to conspiracy debates. It's in politics, marketing, news, everywhere language meets belief. And that's what makes it dangerous. When you accept someone else's frame, you hand over your sense of what's reasonable. You let their words define the limits of truth. In flat earth debates, framing casts one side as foolish and the other as enlightened. But the same tactic appears in every argument where persuasion is the goal. Once you start spotting frames, the illusion fades. You hear the bias in the question itself. You stop letting others define reality for you, and you begin shaping your own. Framing is quiet, but powerful. It hides in plain sight, and once you learn to recognize it, you'll never listen to a question the same way again. So the next time a question sounds a little too tidy, don't rush to answer. Hear it, question it, and decide what story you're truly willing to believe. Join me next time for another episode of Echoes of Persuasion, and always remember, the echoes fade, but persuasion never sleeps.